In the dead of night, when silence seems absolute, there often remains a hidden layer of sound that the human ear cannot detect. These acoustic phantoms can hold the key to solving the most baffling mysteries, if one possesses the technology to unveil them. A pocket dial or an accidental recording can capture the final moments of a life or the whispered confession of a killer. For decades, detectives have relied on fingerprints and blood samples, but a new frontier has emerged in the world of criminal investigation. This is the realm of audio forensics, where sound waves are dissected to reveal secrets that were never meant to be heard. The story begins in the vibrant college town of Chapel Hill, North Carolina, during the early autumn of 2012. The University of North Carolina campus was buzzing with the energy of a new semester, and students were settling into their routines. Among them was a bright and ambitious young woman named Faith Hedgepeth, who had a promising future ahead of her. She was known for her infectious smile and her drive to succeed in her studies. Faith was a member of the Halliwa-Saponi tribal community, and she carried her heritage with pride. Her presence lit up every room she entered, and she was beloved by her friends and family. Faith lived in an off-campus apartment complex that was popular among students for its quiet atmosphere and proximity to the university. She shared the unit with a roommate named Karina Rosario, and the two seemed to have a close friendship. On the surface, everything appeared normal in their lives, but beneath the veneer of collegiate fun, there were underlying tensions. The apartment they shared would soon become the setting for a tragedy that would haunt the community for over a decade. It was a place where safety was assumed, but unfortunately not guaranteed. On the evening of September 6, 2012, Faith and Karina decided to enjoy a night out to celebrate the start of the weekend a bit early. They attended a rush event for a sorority at the university library before heading back to their apartment. The mood was light and festive as they prepared for a late-night excursion to a local nightclub. Faith wore a black dress and looked stunning as they left their home shortly after midnight. They arrived at a club called The Thrill in downtown Chapel Hill, where they planned to dance and socialize with friends. Surveillance footage from The Thrill captured images of Faith and Karina entering the venue and moving through the crowd. The atmosphere inside was loud and chaotic, with music pulsing through the air and lights flashing across the dance floor. Witnesses reported seeing the two women together throughout the night, and there were no obvious signs of distress or conflict. However, the night took a turn when Faith stated she did not feel well and wanted to leave. The two roommates exited the club around 2:30 in the morning and drove back to their apartment. Upon returning to their residence, the timeline of events begins to blur into a confusing haze of witness statements and digital footprints. Phone records indicate that Faith and Karina were back at the apartment by 3 in the morning. A neighbor reported hearing heavy thumping noises coming from their unit shortly after they arrived home. These sounds were dismissed at the time as typical college student activity, perhaps just furniture being moved or a late-night party. No one called the police, and the noise eventually subsided, leaving the complex in silence once again. The next morning, on September 7, Karina left the apartment around 11, leaving Faith behind in her bedroom. Karina claimed she believed Faith was still sleeping and did not want to disturb her. It was not until later that afternoon, around 5 o'clock, when Karina returned with a friend, that the horrific discovery was made. They found Faith Hedgepeth dead in her bedroom, surrounded by a scene of brutal violence. She had been beaten severely, and there was a significant amount of blood at the scene. The panic that ensued resulted in a frantic call to emergency services. Police officers arrived at the apartment to find a crime scene that was both chaotic and perplexing. Faith was found partially undressed and covered in a quilt. Near her body, investigators discovered a handwritten note on a fast food bag that read, "I am not stupid, bitch jealous." The message was cryptic and suggested a personal motive, perhaps rooted in a romantic rivalry or a deep-seated grudge. The brutality of the attack indicated rage rather than a random burglary gone wrong. Detectives began to scour the apartment for any shred of evidence. Among the physical evidence collected was a bottle of rum that appeared to have been used as a weapon and DNA samples that did not belong to Faith. However, one piece of evidence would remain unnoticed by the public for some time. It was a digital recording captured on the smartphone of the roommate Karina. It appeared to be an accidental pocket dial made at 4:16 in the morning roughly, the time investigators believed the murder occurred. This recording was a garbled mess of background noise music and muffled voices. The recording lasted for 3 minutes and 39 seconds, but to the naked ear, it sounded like nothing more than static and distant thumping. It was low quality and filled with the ambient noise of a pocket or a purse rubbing against the microphone. Initial listeners could barely make out any distinct words, let alone identify the speakers. For the police, it was a frustrating puzzle piece that seemed to hold the truth yet refused to yield it. They knew they needed expert help to decipher the audio. Enter the world of high-level audio forensics, where experts use sophisticated software to isolate frequencies and remove background distortion. The investigators turned to specialists who could clean up the track and enhance the faint whispers hidden beneath the noise. The goal was to separate the vocal tracks from the mechanical sounds and the music that was playing in the background. This process is painstaking and requires both technical skill and a trained ear to distinguish between a human voice and an artifact of the recording. The forensic analysis revealed that music was indeed playing in the background during the recording, specifically a rap song. By identifying the song and its tempo, experts could create a time grid to better understand the pacing of the events captured on tape. The song was identified, and its beat served as a metronome for the forensic timeline. With the music filtered out, the voices began to emerge from the static like ghosts taking form in a fog. There was a female voice and at least one male voice. The enhanced audio seemed to capture a conversation that was both heated and terrifying. Listeners who analyzed the cleaned version believed they could hear a woman crying for help and a male voice speaking in angry tones. Some interpretations of the audio suggested the male voice was demanding the victim to be quiet. The most chilling aspect was the potential identification of a name. Many who listened to the forensic enhancement claimed they heard the name Eric, or perhaps Rosie, being spoken clearly. This potential revelation sent shockwaves through the investigation, as detectives tried to match the names heard on the tape to individuals in the orbit of Faith Hedgepeth. They scrutinized ex-boyfriend's acquaintances and anyone who might have had a motive to harm her. The audio became a Rorschach test for the public, with internet sleuths claiming to hear specific confessions, while others heard only random noise. The subjectivity of audio enhancement became a point of contention. What one person heard as a name, another heard as a cough. Despite the ambiguity, the audio recording provided a crucial psychological profile of the crime. It suggested that Faith was not alone with her killer, and that there may have been witnesses or accomplices present. The female voice on the recording sounded distressed, which contradicted the initial theory that Faith might have been asleep when the attack began. The audio implied a prolonged confrontation rather than a sudden ambush. This shifted the entire perspective of the detectives working the case. Years passed, and the case of Faith Hedgepeth went cold despite the tantalizing clues provided by the audio and the handwritten note. The DNA found at the scene did not match anyone in the National Criminal Database. The audio recording was released to the public in hopes that someone would recognize the voices, but no definitive leads emerged. The frustration of the family was palpable as they waited for justice that seemed perpetually out of reach. The recording remained a haunting artifact of unsolved mystery. The legacy of the audio recording grew as true crime documentaries and podcasts analyzed the 3-minute clip. Experts debated the validity of the transcripts that were circulating online. Some argued that the brain fills in gaps in poor audio creating words, where there are none, a phenomenon known as pareidolia. However, the police maintained that the recording was a legitimate piece of evidence that placed specific individuals at the scene. The secret message hidden in the static was the timeline itself, proving exactly when the violence occurred. While the audio forensics provided the context, it was the advancement of DNA technology that would ultimately break the stalemate. In recent years, a new technique called genetic genealogy began to revolutionize cold case investigations. This method involves taking the unknown DNA from a crime scene and building a family tree to locate distant relatives of the suspect. It was the same technology used to catch the Golden State Killer, and it was about to be applied to the tragedy in Chapel Hill. Investigators sent the DNA profile found on the rum bottle and the semen found at the scene to a specialized lab. The genealogists worked tirelessly to construct a family tree that would lead them to the source of the genetic material. They traced the lineage through public records and databases, narrowing down the pool of potential suspects from thousands to just a handful. This scientific approach bypassed the limitations of the audio evidence and pointed directly to a specific individual. The genetic trail led investigators to a man named Miguel Salguero Olivares. He was not a student at the university and had not been on the primary radar of the detectives during the initial investigation. He had been living in the area at the time of the murder, but had managed to avoid suspicion for nearly a decade. The police initiated a surveillance operation to obtain a direct DNA sample from him to confirm the match. They waited for him to discard an item that could be tested. Once the confirmation was made, the police moved in to make an arrest. Miguel Salguero Olivares was taken into custody and charged with the first-degree murder of Faith Hedgepeth. The news of the arrest brought a wave of relief to the Chapel Hill community and to the family of Faith, who had waited 9 long years for answers. The arrest also brought the audio recording back into focus as investigators sought to determine if the male voice on the tape belonged to the suspect. Voice comparison analysis was conducted to see if the speech patterns of Miguel Salguero Olivares matched the muffled commands heard on the pocket dial. While audio forensics is not as definitive as DNA, it served as corroborating evidence. The prosecution could now argue that the timeline established by the background music and the voices on the tape aligned perfectly with the physical evidence linking the suspect to the scene. The secret message of the tape was finally being decoded in the context of a known perpetrator. The arrest of Olivares raised new questions about the events of that night. Did he act alone, or were there others present, as the audio seemed to suggest? The female voice on the recording that was not Faith remained a subject of intense speculation. Was it the roommate, or was it someone else entirely? The police remained tight-lipped about these details as they built their case for trial, ensuring that they did not jeopardize the prosecution. The investigation revealed that the handwritten note found at the scene was likely a red herring meant to confuse detectives and stage the scene to look like a crime of passion involving a jealous rival. The audio recording, however, could not be staged in the same way. It was a raw and unfiltered capture of reality. It proved that the killer had spent time in the apartment and that the interaction was not instantaneous. The audio was the silent witness that the killer did not know was listening. As the legal proceedings moved forward, the importance of the audio forensics became clear. It helped to destroy any potential alibi the suspect might concoct regarding his whereabouts. The specific rap song playing in the background pinpointed the exact minute of the crime, making it impossible for the defense to argue that he was elsewhere. The invisible waves of sound had solidified into bars of iron around the accused. The case of Faith Hedgepeth serves as a grim reminder of the fragility of life and the endurance of truth. The combination of old-school detective work, advanced DNA science, and cutting-edge audio forensics created a trifecta of evidence that was impossible to ignore. The secret message was not just a name or a word, but the undeniable reality of the event preserved in time. It demonstrated that even in the chaos of a violent crime, technology can capture the echoes of the truth. For the family of Faith, the arrest was a bittersweet victory. It brought closure to the question of who, but it could never answer the question of why. The vibrant life of a young woman was cut short by a senseless act of violence. The audio recording remains a difficult thing for them, to acknowledge a permanent record of their loved one's last moments. Yet without it, the timeline might never have been established so precisely. The field of audio forensics continues to evolve, with artificial intelligence now playing a role in isolating voices and enhancing quality. Future cases will likely rely even more heavily on these techniques as smart devices and always-on microphones become ubiquitous in our lives. The pocket dial that helped catch a killer in Chapel Hill was a precursor to a world where silence is increasingly rare and evidence is everywhere. The conviction of the killer brought a finality to the legal case, but the mystery of the second set of voices on the tape lingers in the minds of true crime enthusiasts. Was there a second person who walked away free, or was the audio simply a distortion of reality? The experts may never agree fully on every syllable heard that night, but the result speaks for itself. Justice was delayed, but it was not denied. In the end, the secret message uncovered by audio forensics was one of accountability. It told the story of a crime that could not be buried. It reminded us that we leave traces of ourselves not just in our DNA, but in the sounds we make and the digital footprints we leave behind. The silence of the night is an illusion, and for Faith Hedgepeth, the truth was waiting to be heard in the static.